Ladies and gentlemen, today I have something pretty unique to show you because Marco decided to host yet another tournament. By the way, if you have no idea what I'm talking about, I would suggest you to go watch this video first and then come back here for this video, because if you like the last one, you're gonna love this one. Today's story is not only unique, but also pretty exciting, full of plot twists. So, without any further ado, let's get into it. As you can see, today more people are participating. 14 contestants are ready to battle it all out until only one remains to get the prize ball of €5, generally given away by Marco, the host of the tournament. We immediately start strong because the first contestants to play are Pulpatoso, yeah, him again, and Diaz, stay humble. If you want to know more about Pulpatoso, go check out the last video. Trust me, it's worth your time. Anyways, I have to make a statement here because unlike the last tournament that I casted, today there are going to be a lot less one-way games in which one of the two players absolutely crushes the other one. And there are going to be many more games decided by the tiebreaker, like for example this one, that as you can see was won by Diaz but only thanks to 2000 more damage inflicted. Then it was time for Federico and Soteba to play their first round against each other, with Colt. Oh, and I forgot to say that the brawlers were chosen with a lucky wheel just to randomize a little bit. And anyways, Federico won 1-0, pretty clean, let's move on. Alright, so game 3 was actually probably the most important game in the entire tournament. I know, crazy statement, but believe me, it is. And you'll get why a little bit later on. And as well as being important, this game was actually repeated once, because in the first game, Dio's brother, aka Death in Game, used a little bit too much of auto-aim and got a little bit extra damage on me, and since the game went on to the tiebreaker, we decided to invalidate the game and repeat it. I can already hear you screaming in the comment section, Death dealt me 6000 damage and Eduzzo only made 9445 healing, so if you do 16595 minus 6000, you still get a number bigger than 9445. So this means that Death, and even without counting the damage inflicted to me, got a little bit more damage than Eduzzo, and therefore it should have been given the win. But I have to admit that in the moment I didn't realize this and we decided to repeat the game, that obviously Eduzzo proceeded to win, sending Diaz brother in the loser bracket. You know, life is not fair. Yes, now you're getting why this game is so important, but like in the last video, I want you to keep an eye on Death, because even though he lost the first game, he played a great tournament, so don't forget about him. Another thing that you're gonna know is that I won't cover every single game because the video would last way too much and it would get boring. So I'm moving on to game 4, and yes, if you notice in the bracket there was a mistake, we'll talk about that later, don't worry. Jack was paired against Climax playing with RT. It was a clean, pretty even game, but in the end Jack was able to get a couple of kills and qualified for the next round. Now we're going to jump over game 5 and 6. In the loser bracket we have Soteba playing against Dio's brother. Again, a pretty equal game. With Byron, neither of the players tried to risk it, so at the end Dio's brother won thanks to the tiebreaker and qualified for the next round. I'm not gonna talk much about game 8 because Diaz simply got a 5-0 against the Spanish guy and moved on. In game 9 we had two very important players facing each other, Diaz and Ferrix, that didn't participate in the last tournament but is one in the favorites. Anyways, they had to play Manny, and the damage was close, but in the end Ferrix made it and pushed Diaz in the loser bracket. Then we had Federico playing against Eduzzo, and this game, just like many others, had to decide who would go further with the tiebreaker. This game was not even at all though, because Eduzzo managed to get twice as much damage as Federico, but they only got a kill each. Alright, so now we have Jack against Antonio, and trust me, even though many games were close, this one was probably the closest of all, because the damage was basically even, with a slight advantage for Antonio, but then 6 seconds from the end, Jack got the first and last kill of the game, making a crazy comeback, because nobody knew during the game what was the damage count, so Jack decided to go all in, and that was a great choice. Alright, so now it's time to reveal how we solved the problem. Yeah, two Jacks in the bracket, well, as simple as it looked, we just got a person from the chat to substitute the second Jack. So Mariano got his spot and played against Hedy. Initially Hedy was lagging, so Mariano got a bit advantage, but then Hedy made a comeback from 3-0 to 3-3. Unfortunately for him, we lost the tiebreaker, but I convinced Marco to repeat the game, because without the lag, Hedy would have surely won. But the second time things went a little bit differently, because Mariano demonstrated that he could win even without the opponent lag, and so he won 2-1. Now Hedy was paired against Just Crush, the winner of the last tournament. And you might say, Just Crush won the last tournament, Hedy just lost the game, so his morale will be low, he's gonna lose, right? Wrong, he actually defeated Just Crush, and defeated is reductive. He absolutely annihilated Just Crush with the astonishing score of 7-0. Now for the next game, Dio's brother, aka Death, should have played against Antonio, but Antonio had to go, and so we decided to get someone from the chat to substitute him, and this was his Twitch name, decided to show up against Diaz Brother. But it didn't really go well for him because Death was hungry for a win, so he just pulled out a 7-0. Crazy that the most one-way games of the tournament were played one just right after the other, 7-0 and 7-0. The next two games are not so relevant, so I'm just gonna tell you that Climax beat Federico and Dioz beat a guy from the chat that substituted Rakes, a player that we didn't even cover in the winner bracket. That's all you gotta know. Okay, so now probably one of the best derby ever because Eduzzo played against Felix. Both of these guys are favorites for the ultimate win, so seeing them now paired against each other is brutal, and believe it or not, this early final, if you wanna call it that, ended up being one of the few one-way games of the tournament because Eduzzo showed that he's here to win and that nobody is going to stop him. Not even one of his best Brussels friends Felix, and so he ended up getting 5 goddamn kills. Yeah, I was shocked just like you. But now it's time for the other quarterfinal between Jack and Mariano, aka GM Legend game. The game was even, and at some point Mariano almost got a kill, but Jack didn't freak out, and calmly took the lead. This happened at the very end of the game, so Mariano decided to push and got killed again. 2-0 for Jack that qualifies for the semi-final. Moving on once again to the loser bracket, Dio's brother was paired against Eddie, playing with Max. For the whole game, Eddie had the initiative and pushed back Diaz's brother, but he never gave up, and at the right moment he got a kill to let him keep going in the tournament and get paired against Felix. Now it was time for Diaz against Climax, playing with RT. This one ended up with a tiebreaker, that at the end was won by Climax. Yeah, believe it or not, Diaz, a player that last time got very close to the final, got eliminated by Climax. Now a very important game, the semi-final between Eduzzo and Jack. Eduzzo immediately got a kill to put the pressure on Jack, that tried his best to even things up, but this aggressive behavior ended up being a fatal mistake because Eduzzo managed to get 2 more kills. 3-1 is the final result, and after beating 3 favorites for the ultimate win, Eduzzo is now on paper the guy who is gonna bring the 5 Euros home, only waiting to know who will be paired against him in the final, the very last obstacle between him and the prize pool. So now it is time for Felix against Death. But Felix previously told us that he had to go on a date with a random girl and so he could not join us anymore, which means that we let a player from the chat substitute him. This player was called Editlam and he gave an hard time to Death, but at the end Death activated his hypercharge and killed him, qualifying for the semi-final loser bracket. Now it would have been time for Mariano against Climax, but Mariano didn't show up. And so this time, instead of letting someone from the chat to substitute him, we decided to give the forfeit to Climax, that was ready to battle against Death. Both players had to play Bell, and they chose the trap gadget. And even if Death plays his traps better than Climax and managed to get him twice, Climax didn't die despite the slow, and managed to reverse the situation and kill Death. 20 seconds were left, and Death had to get a kill if he wanted to keep going in the tournament. And so he pushed. He pushed like if his life depended on it, and did not give up. At the end, he got a kill, 10 seconds from the end of the game. At this point, I was screaming during my cast, because I simply could not believe that a player that lost his first game against the now favorite of the tournament Eduzzo was one step away from the loser bracket final against Jack. And I let the stats speak for themselves. Death had more damage, and therefore, it is now time for the final of the loser bracket. I want to let the gameplay speak for itself, so enjoy the loser bracket final. Death won 3-0. Pretty clean. And now it is time for the final. Death, the player that got defeated on the first round by Eduzzo himself because of a mistake in the calculation of damages, is now paired once again against Eduzzo, who annihilated most of his opponents and beat the rest. That now he's ready to bring the money home. Who will win the final? The favorite or the guy hungry for revenge? I don't care if I get a copyright claim at this point, this final deserves this song. Action! This final was epic, and eventually Death got revenge and brought the €5 zone. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one. And as always, thanks for watching.